There is a forest that neither kingdom has entered willingly for 300 years. Not because it is cursed, because everyone who has crossed it has returned believing the other side was never the enemy. On one side stands Aldrich, human, walled, ruled by a council that remembers the war the way old wounds remember rain. On the other, the realm of Sylvain, elvish, unseen, governed by something closer to memory than law. Between them stands Thornwood, a forest so ancient that neither kingdom claims to know who first called it home, older than either side's oldest records, and dense enough that neither has ever fully mapped it. It is forbidden to cross. It has been forbidden for 300 years. This is the story of the one time it was crossed anyway, and what the forest kept in return for those who crossed it. Elia was the youngest archivist of Sylvain, which meant she spent her days underground, in the long stone libraries beneath the old willow roots, cataloguing histories that the rest of her people preferred not to revisit. She was good at her work. She was, by the standards of her kind, unusually curious about the world beyond the border, a trait her superiors regarded the way you might regard a small crack in a dam. Not dangerous yet, worth watching. She had never seen a human. She had read about them extensively, their short lives, their quick anger, their strange devotion to walls and borders, and the counting of days, but she had never stood in front of one, and some private, unspoken part of her had always wondered what that would be like. Thomas was a forester's son from the edge of Aldrich, which meant he had grown up closer to Thornwood than almost anyone in the kingdom, and had spent his whole life being told never to enter it. His father cut timber from the forest's outer edge, where the old laws permitted it, and had taught Thomas the unspoken rule that governed every forester's life: take only from the first 100 paces. Never go further. Thomas had spent 22 years obeying that rule. He broke it on an ordinary Tuesday, chasing a hunting dog that had bolted after a deer, and did not realise how far he had gone until he no longer recognised the trees around him. He found Elia by accident, in a small clearing where she had gone to read undisturbed, a habit she'd kept since childhood, slipping just past the border markers where the elders never thought to look, because no elder ever expected the danger to come from beyond the border. He startled her. She startled him more. Neither of them ran, which surprised them both. Later, neither could explain exactly why. Thomas would say he simply forgot how to move. Elia would say that she had spent so long imagining this exact moment that some part of her refused to let it end so quickly. They did not speak much that first time. Thomas asked eventually, in the halting voice of someone unsure if the question itself was an offence, what her name was. She told him. She asked his in return. He told her, and then, because he could not think of anything else to say and could not seem to make himself leave, he asked if she would be in the clearing again. She said she didn't know. She was there the next day. What grew between them grew slowly, the way things grow when both people understand, without saying so, that there is no good ending available to them. They met in the clearing, once a week at first, then twice, then with a regularity that neither of them tracked, but both of them felt, the way you feel a held breath. He brought her things from his world, a pressed flower from his mother's garden, which she had never seen before and turned over in her hands for nearly an hour. A small carved bird that his grandfather had made, which she kept in the deepest drawer of her archive desk, beneath records nobody else would ever think to search. She brought him stories, true ones from the old archives, about the centuries before the war, when the border had not existed and the two kingdoms had traded and married and built things together. He had never been taught any of it. His kingdom's histories began with the war, as though nothing had existed before the wound that caused it. She taught him 3 words in Elvish. He never managed to pronounce them correctly. She told him, every time, that he was getting closer, which was not entirely true, and which he suspected she knew was not entirely true, and which he loved her for anyway, though neither of them had used that word yet. It was Elia who said it first, on an evening in late autumn, when the light through Thornwood's canopy had turned the colour of old amber, and Thomas had just finished telling her, badly, in her own language, that he didn't want to go home. She said the word in Elvish. He didn't understand it. She said it again in his language. He understood that one. They both knew. In the way you know a winter is coming before the first cold morning arrives, that this could not continue forever in secret. Elia's absences had begun to draw notice. An archivist who left the stacks more often than her work required, who returned with a particular quality of distraction that her colleagues had started to remark upon. Thomas's father had noticed too, a son who returned later than the hunt required, who had started, without realizing it, to hum a melody his father had never heard, in a language his father had never heard either. Neither of them had been planning to tell anyone. The decision was made for them. A border patrol, Sylvains moving the perimeter on a routine sweep that should not have brought them anywhere near the clearing, found them together on a morning in early winter, Thomas's hand resting against the bark of the old willow beside Elia's, neither of them quite touching, both of them caught in the unmistakable stillness of two people who had just been interrupted mid-sentence. Word reached the elders of Sylvain before the sun had set. Word reached the council of Aldrich the following day, carried by a Sylvain messenger under a flag of formal protest, the first official contact between the two kingdoms in 300 years, delivered not as an offer of peace but as an accusation. Thomas was brought before his king. Elia was brought before her elders. Both were asked the same question, in different words, in different languages, by people who had decided the answer before they asked it. Did you know this was forbidden? Both answered yes. The punishment was not death. Both kingdoms, for all their old grievance, were not eager to be the side that drew first blood in 300 years of uneasy quiet. The punishment was simpler, and in its way crueler. Thomas was sent to the far garrison at Aldrich's northern border, 3 weeks' ride from Thornwood, with the clear understanding that he would not be permitted to return until the king's council decided otherwise, which they had no particular intention of doing soon. Elia was sealed beneath the deepest archive, assigned to the oldest and least visited records, in a section of the library that received almost no foot traffic and no daylight at all. Not imprisonment, technically, reassignment. The elders were careful about language, but everyone, including Elia, understood what it was. Neither was told what had happened to the other. Thomas asked every week, in every letter he was permitted to send to his family, whether anyone had heard news from the border. He never received an answer that told him anything. Elia asked the senior archivists, carefully, in the indirect way her people preferred, whether anything had been heard about the disturbance at the human border. She was told every time that it was not her concern anymore. They each, separately, began to understand that this was the punishment, not pain, not even separation exactly, the slow erosion of certainty, the not knowing whether the other had been forgiven, forgotten, moved on, or simply stopped thinking of them at all. Thomas kept the small carved bird's twin. His grandfather had made a pair, and he had kept one for himself without telling Elia, a quiet insurance against a day he hadn't let himself imagine. He kept it in his pack at the garrison, through 3 winters of frozen watch duty, and would take it out sometimes at night and turn it over in his hands, the way she had turned over the pressed flower, all those years ago, when the world had still felt like something that might let them stay. Elia kept the pressed flower, beneath the same records nobody searched, and added to it, over the years, small things of her own, a scrap of parchment with 3 words written in her careful hand, the ones she had taught him, the ones he had never quite managed to say correctly. She practiced his language alone in the unlit archive, shaping the foreign sounds softly enough that no one would hear. Neither knew, across all those years, that the other had not stopped. It was a junior border guard, Sylvain, young, new to the patrol, who found the gap in the old protocol almost by accident, nearly 4 years after the morning in the clearing. A retired messenger, reminiscing without thinking about who might be listening, mentioned the human forester who used to write letters asking after news from Thornwood. The guard, who had heard a different version of the same story from an old archivist's apprentice, put the 2 halves together before she had even decided to. She told no one in command. She rode alone to the human side of the border and found a way to reach the garrison. What she carried was not a letter. The elders would never have permitted that, and the human council would have intercepted it regardless. What she carried was smaller, a single word, spoken in Elvish, that she had memorized exactly as the archivist's apprentice had described it. the word Alea had said in the clearing all those years ago. The one Thomas had never understood until she said it again in his own tongue. She delivered it to him exactly as she'd received it. No explanation, no context he hadn't already lived. Thomas understood it immediately. He left the garrison that night, knowing exactly what it would cost him, and did not look back at what he was leaving, because he had already spent 4 years learning that some things are worth losing everything for, and he no longer needed to be convinced. What happened at the border in the weeks that followed is recorded differently by each kingdom, and the two records do not agree on almost any detail except the outcome. Aldrith's council records describe a forester abandoning his post and crossing into enemy territory, an act they were prepared to call treason until the Elvish response made clear that pursuing it would reopen a war neither side wanted. Sylvain's elders describe a young archivist's improper conduct catalysing an unauthorised human incursion that should have ended in conflict and instead, against every precedent either kingdom could find, did not. What both records agree on, reluctantly, in the careful language of diplomats trying to explain something they did not want to legitimise, is this. The two of them met again at the Border of Thornwood, in the same season they had first met 4 years before, and refused every order given by either side to separate. Neither kingdom had a protocol for two people who simply would not stop choosing each other, regardless of the cost. What happened after that is where the two records stop agreeing entirely, and where the official histories of both kingdoms quietly end. The last confirmed sighting of either of them was a Border Scouts report, filed by Sylvain 3 weeks after the reunion, noting two figures walking together into the deep interior of Thornwood, past the point on any map either kingdom has ever successfully drawn, into the part of the forest that belongs, properly, to neither side, and never did. No patrol has gone in after them, not because it's forbidden anymore, because the ones who tried did not care to discuss what they found, and asked every time not to be sent again. What is known, because it has been reported too many times by too many separate scouts to dismiss as a single account, is this. There is a clearing in the deep interior of Thornwood that appears on no survey, and within it, set facing each other on a stone at its centre, two small carved birds, weathered by years but still intact. The clearing is always still, always quiet, as though something had only just stepped away from it. Foresters who have stumbled near it report fresh footprints in the soil around the stone, always two sets, side by side, the kind that come from people walking close together. The footprints never lead away from the clearing, only toward it, from every direction, as though something keeps arriving there and never leaving. One scout, in a report the Sylvain archive has tried twice to quietly remove, wrote that she said the names aloud without thinking. Thomas, then Elia, simply reading them off an old border record she'd been sent to retrieve. She wrote that something answered her. From deeper in the forest, in a voice she did not recognise as either Elvish or human, speaking both names back to her, gently, the way you'd correct someone who almost had the pronunciation right. She did not finish her assignment that day. The report ends there. No further scouts have been sent to that part of Thornwood since. Dark hour, sit back, listen, drift off.